Hi, I'm back with our one simple recipe, and this week it is chickpea noodle soup. So it's a vegan version of chicken noodle soup, and I think you're going to love it. My name is Judy Matuski, and I'm a registered dietitian and a licensed culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So it's good to be back. We're here every week at 11:30, mostly every week. I know I wasn't here last week, but mostly every week at 11:30, bringing you one simple recipe, hoping to get you one step closer to better health. So let's get started. We're making chickpea noodle soup. This is a fantastic recipe. I actually found it from a blog that I follow. May I have that recipe, as well as it appeared in Bon Appetit as well. I made a few subtle modifications to it, but for the most part, it's pretty close to the original. All right, so I have a pot here. You're going to need, either a Dutch oven or a pot to be cooking this in. I'm just going to get I have a 1/4 cup of olive oil in here right now, and I want to get this heated up a little bit so that we can do our first step. So there's a couple different ingredients here. The main ingredients is chickpea. So we're using chickpeas instead of chicken in this recipe. And we're going to be using something called soba noodles instead of just regular noodles that you find in regular chicken noodle soup. So we'll talk about some of these ingredients just from a culinary perspective, but also certainly from a nutrition perspective. So I have this heat going. The first step, we're going to use the chickpeas in 2 ways. So we're going to be crisping the chickpeas that we're going to use as a little garnish at the end. And then the chickpeas are going to actually just go in whole. So I started with 2 15-ounce cans of chickpeas. I drained them and rinsed them. They're just kind of sitting here. They're, pretty well drained. And then I took a 1/2 cup of the chickpeas and set them aside, and I just put them in a paper towel, and I let them sit for a little bit, patted them, because you want these dry, because we're going to try to crisp them. And if they're not dry and you throw them in the oil, they're going to just kind of steam. So I think we're good. This oil, we're starting with a 1/4 cup, and that's all we're going to need through the whole recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and throw these in, and they're just going to go, I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit here. They're going to just stay in here for a couple of minutes. We're going to let them just do their thing. I can hear them starting to sizzle a little bit. And while that's going, the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about, maybe just a couple quick ingredients that we're going to be using, so you kind of have a sense of the direction this is taking. So we're going to crisp these up, take these out, and then we're going to, I went ahead and I chopped up 1 large onion. So again, I like to get these things in advance. Now, they're popping. Does that mean that you do? And I think the answer to that is yes. So mise en place, right? So I have a tray here that I put out, and I just have all my ingredients on it. So I have everything in front of me. Now, yeah, it's great to do this when I'm doing a cooking demo like this, when I'm doing it live, so I have everything. But this is the way you'd love to set up your kitchen and your counter when you're cooking. It just makes cooking so much easier. And you don't forget things. You're not running to the, into the refrigerator to grab stuff. So have it all out. And if you can pre-chop things, go ahead if you have the time. Oh my gosh, they're really popping. They're really popping. I'm just going to cover this a little bit so they don't fly all over the place. But that's good to know. I forgot that they did this. I haven't made this in a little bit, so I forgot that. Yeah, they're gonna pop a little bit while they're crisping up. So you might just want to put the cover on a little bit, but not all the way, obviously, because we don't want it to steam. So we'll let them go. So anyway, so I have these pre-chopped. I kind of have everything ready. This is just a large, regular white onion. And then I also chopped a couple of cloves of garlic and a nice big piece of ginger. So those are things that I just kind of have ready to go that we're gonna add soon after these little chickpeas are finished. So let me just take a peek. They're really, oh my gosh, they're really popping. So you want to be careful when you're doing these so that they don't get you, because they are a little bit hot. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn this heat down a tiny bit, because I'm going to go back in and I'm going to pull some of these out. They're like little bombs going off. All right, let me grab some of these out of here. And then they might have been, I thought I had them dry, but they might have been just a little wetter than, really popping. They might have been just a little wetter than I thought they were, but I don't know. I thought I had them pretty dry. So that's just a good little thing to know. You might want to keep them a little bit covered as you're doing that. All right, so now that I pulled these aside. Actually, let's do one real quick step. Let me just leave my pan off heat for just a minute. So now that I pulled them, you're going to put them on a plate, and you're going to add about a half a teaspoon of quarter of a teaspoon to half a teaspoon of some salt. I'm going to probably use more like a quarter. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. And we'll talk about nutritional yeast here in a minute. And again, we're using the nutritional yeast in 2 different ways as well. We're using it to coat our little crispy chickpeas. And then we're also using it to add to our sauce, to our soup. So here are the chickpeas. And what you really want to put the salt and the nutritional yeast on the chickpeas as soon as you kind of pull them out of the oil so everything kind of sticks to it. All right, I probably could have left these in here a little bit longer to get them a little bit crisper, but they were just popping so much that I kind of wanted to pull them out. All right, so they're going to just sit aside. So I'm going to put these off to the side, and let me just pull this back over. I turn the heat down a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and saute our onion. So this is that one large white onion. It could be a sweet onion or just a regular onion. Not white, I'm sorry, yellow onion. So there's a difference between white and yellow. So this is a yellow onion. This wasn't a sweet onion, it was just a regular yellow onion, but it was a pretty good size onion. So medium heat, I'd say, for this. Medium to high. So we're just going to let this saute a little bit around for, maybe 3 minutes. This is just to get them softened up a little bit. So let's talk real quick about nutritional yeast, if this is something you're not familiar with. So this is what it looks like when you have it, when you have it out of its container. I didn't have the original, well, I'll take that back. Normally the brand that you're going to find with nutritional yeast is the brand Braggs, which is Braggs. It's usually in a bottle. It's in, I don't know, depending on your supermarket. It could be in different places, but that's probably the brand you're going to find in the supermarket. What I do is, because I tend to go to a market that's fairly close by that has it in bulk, so I buy the nutritional yeast in bulk, and then I just keep it in a jar, and I do keep this in my freezer just to keep it fresh. So nutritional yeast is basically a deactivated yeast. You can't make bread with it. It isn't the bread type of yeast anyway. It's a different type, it's like a brewer's yeast. It's deactivated, but when it's made, it really takes on this very umami, again that word, but almost like a Parmesan cheese flavor. It smells a little bit like crushed up corn chips. It smells great. Might sound odd if you're not used to using this, but it really has a great flavor. A lot of vegan recipes, or anybody following a vegan eating plan will often use this as a Parmesan cheese substitute. So it's great on popcorn, it's great on salads. I use it a lot when I'm making pasta sauces. Sometimes I'll use this instead of Parmesan cheese if I really just want to skip the cheese altogether. It is a really good source of B12, but you have to be careful because like the Braggs brand and the Bob's Red Mill brand, they have B12 added to the nutritional yeast, but some of the bulk yeast may not have that. So you have to kind of check if you're trying to use this as your B12 source. So if you're vegan, it's difficult to get B12 in plant foods. It's really, really mostly in animal foods. So this is a reliable source for a lot of vegans. But anyway, that's one thing. And it is a pretty good source of protein. So it has a decent amino acid profile. So it's really a nice addition. Then there's no saturated fat. It's dairy-free, gluten-free. It's all those things. So if you're concerned about any of those things in your diet, nutritional yeast could be a nice substitute. So again, I usually buy, and I'm at the end of it. This is usually full. I go through it pretty quickly because I'll just use it for a lot of things. It just adds a nice little richness to some things. Or you can add it to sauces, like I said, or you can use it as a finishing and just sprinkle it right on top. All right, so our onions are looking pretty good. So they're just breaking down. All right, now the recipe calls for a quarter cup of nutritional yeast plus 2 tablespoons. And I had a quarter of a cup of nutritional yeast measured out here, but I dipped into that, for the chickpeas. So I'm going to add back those 2 tablespoons. So you need a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons. All right. So now that these have onions have broken down, a little, not broken down, but just softened up a little bit, get a little translucent. I'm going to go ahead and add the garlic and the ginger. So pretty basic. Again, most of you that are cooking regularly probably always have onions, garlic, and ginger in your pantry. I mean, or in your refrigerator. They're pretty much staples for me. I don't know that I ever not have them around. All right, so those are going to go in. We're just going to saute this up for like another minute or so. All right, just to kind of bring these all together. So let's let that go. All right, and then the next step is really just to add the nutritional yeast, the 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. And then we're going to add another, I feel like I use this word too much, the umami flavor, but it's just that savory flavor that you can pick up when you're not using animal proteins, you know. So if you're not using meat, if you're not using animal proteins that can lend that savory richness to dishes, we're relying on other things in the plant world to do that for us. Nutritional yeast is one of them, excuse me, and miso is another one. I'm just going to grab a little sip of water. I was off last week because I just had this cold that was just such a cough that it would have been impossible for me to get through. I think I'm pretty much past it, so I'm hoping I can get through without coughing, but feeling certainly a lot better. All right, so this looks good. So now we're just going to add that 1/4 cup. Well, you know what? Let me show you. This is hot. You know, it's hot. Let me just grab my. So here's what your onions and your garlic and your ginger looks like. Now we're going to add that 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast, and now we're going to use miso. And we'll just talk a little bit more about that. This is about 2 tablespoons of miso that we're going to want to add. Now this miso is, now let me just kind of stir this around for a minute, and then we'll talk about it. So just the miso, I'll show you to you in a minute, but you want to get this stirred around. We're not going to keep this in here too long. So once you add the nutritional yeast and the miso, just kind of break up the miso a little bit because it is a kind of thick paste, and stir things around. And again, I can show this to you. It's on my tongue, sticking to my tongues. And this you're just going to want to kind of just about 30 seconds or so. You don't need to, we don't want to, necessarily burn anything here, but let me just show that to you real quick. So then this was with the nutritional yeast and the miso added, okay? So it's a white miso or yellow miso. And then about 30 seconds, and we're going to talk about this miso in a minute, but I just kind of want to move on so I can kind of get this going. Then you don't really need any broth, any vegetable broth for this. We're just going to add 6 cups of water because the nutritional yeast and the miso are really going to sort of build that broth for us. So now I'm just going to add the 6 cups of water. All right. Now I'm going to turn the heat up now because I want to bring this up to a boil. And I'm going to shorten the cooking time on this, but I'll talk you through how long it's supposed to go. So just kind of stir things around a little bit. Just make sure that miso kind of has, you've kind of broken that up a little bit. So it is, more of a paste. I'm going to cover it until I can get this up to a boil. And then we'll go on to the next step. All right, so miso. So again, a couple of things in this recipe that you may be familiar with and be using all the time, or you may not be. So the nutritional yeast is the one of them. And if you haven't used nutritional yeast, I would really, really recommend trying it. I think you'll like it. Honestly, I don't think I've recommended it to anybody or any of my clients who have used it in a lot of different things as a substitute for Parmesan cheese that hasn't liked it. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine, it's great. And no, it's not exactly Parmesan cheese, but it's pretty nice, close plant-based alternative. All right. Miso is basically a fermented soybeans, and it's like a paste. So I think if you saw me scoop that out. So this would be considered yellow or light miso or white miso, even though it's not really white. But this is a lighter version of miso. I don't have the red miso or the darker miso to show you, but there are apparently, I don't know, 1,300 different types of miso across Japan and the world. But here in the US, we typically see two, maybe more, but depending on the market you're in. But typically, it's either the white or the yellow miso, or it's the red miso. I usually have both in my refrigerator because I do use both, but right now I only have the lighter color. So this miso is, both are fermented from soybeans, which again gives us a little bit of that probiotic benefit. So miso does add some probiotics to any kind of fermented food, so that's a good thing. It is certainly a sodium source, so it is higher in salt. I happen to be able to find one that's a mild sodium miso we have again, just like love that we have this Japanese market really close to us. It's called Mido in Ardmore. And I often grab a lot of these types of things from that market. They have a lower sodium, and even that's still high. But I want, because for this I want the salt. We kind of want some of this sodium to add flavor to the broth, and then we're just kind of using a little less added salt, depending on your flavor preferences or your sodium sensitivity. So this is it does add sodium, which is fine. It adds that flavor. It does have that depth and savoriness, just like we're using the nutritional yeast in the plant world. That's what this does. Usually the lighter miso tends to be used more like if you're making soups or miso soup, or if you're making sauces, or I use it a lot when I'm making pasta. If I'm making a pasta sauce, I might add this just to add some more richness, because it's not richness without a lot of extra fat, without adding extra rich butter or cream. You can kind of get that from using the miso. And so I use it quite a bit, not in traditional Japanese kind of recipes, but just in a lot of different recipes. I'll certainly add it to it. So the lighter miso tends to be in things that might have a little bit of you need a little lighter flavor, or just have a lighter color in what you're doing. And then the red, darker miso is just a richer, deeper. It's fermented. Those soybeans are fermented even longer, and it gets deeper and richer in flavor. So that's really great, like with mushrooms, or like a deep, darker sauce that you might be making. So those are the two that you'll generally find. I love that. This has just been such a great find. I've been using it for a couple of years now. I use it in so many things. If I'm making a soup and it just needs a little something, or if I'm making a sauce, I would just toss this with pasta water. When I'm cooking pasta, I might just take my pasta and a little of the pasta water and just mix it with some miso and thin it down a little bit, and that's it. And maybe then sprinkle some nutritional yeast on top of the pasta, and that to me is just a little cracked pepper, and I'm good to go. It's kind of my version of the cacio e pepe, which I tried to make the other day, and it was a big fail. I've been trying to make it, and I just can't seem to get that sauce. If you've ever tried it, if you've made it, let me know how you do it, because I can't seem to get the sauce really creamy. My cheese tends to want to clump on me, but that's an aside. So anyway, there's our miso. Okay, so in here, just to recap, it's not quite up to a boil, because again, I'm gonna move things along, but it's getting there. This was our onion. This was our sauteed onion and some olive oil that was left over from crisping up our chickpeas. Then we added the ginger, we added the garlic, we added the nutritional yeast, and the miso. That's what's building this broth. So you can see that this is certainly chickpea noodle soup, not a chicken noodle soup. It's really straying from just like a traditional soup. But when I first saw the title of this, I was like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like, it's like a great plant-based version of chicken noodle soup. And I made it several times, and I just really loved it. So I thought I'll share it with you, because again, super easy, super easy. And what's nice about a couple of these ingredients that we're using that you might not necessarily always have in your pantry, once you get them, you can keep them in your pantry. So nutritional yeast, like I said, if you buy it in bulk or you buy the Broggs brand, just if you don't, I tend to like to keep things in my freezer. I don't know that you need to. You can probably just keep this on your pantry shelf, and then pull it out and use it, or keep it close by so you see it and you remember to use it on things. Just play with it. It lasts, I'm not going to say forever, but it lasts a really long time. The miso It's this you do want to keep in your refrigerator once you, well, either way, when it's not opened, you'll find this is a refrigerated item. So this stays in your refrigerator, but again, lasts like forever almost. It just because of the sodium content and the fermentation, it doesn't, I have never had one go bad on me. I don't know what the shelf life is, but it's pretty long. If you know, let me know. All right, so this is coming up now to a boil. So the recipe, and I always tend to do this. I would kind of cheat time when I'm cooking with you guys on live here. You would want this, you bring it to a boil, and then you bring it back down to a simmer, and you just kind of want to let it cook for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. And then again, that's just kind of continuing to soften up the onions a little bit more. It's bringing all those flavors together as they're in here cooking together. But since I am moving forward here a little bit more quickly, I'm going to kind of do the next step with you because it almost doesn't matter, but I'm just going with what the traditional recipe said. So anyway, the next thing we're going to do is our soba noodles. All right, so I can spend a few minutes just chatting about these too. So this might be another thing that might be a little bit new to you if you're not using, if not familiar with soba noodles. So I just wanted to go over them real quick just in case, and you certainly can look this up too. But soba noodles, you tend to buy them. They sort of come in a pack like this. This just happened to be the brand that was in my supermarket. Now, the one thing with soba noodles are like traditionally known as buckwheat noodles because they're usually made from buckwheat flour. However, most of the soba noodles you're going to find in your markets are probably maybe 3/4 buckwheat flour and 1/4 of a wheat flour, or maybe even half and half. So although buckwheat is traditionally a gluten-free grain, although it's technically not really a grain, but a gluten-free flour or grain, it's not necessarily when you're using soba noodles. So just know that because I looked at the ingredients. There's only 3 ingredients. It's just wheat flour. It's buckwheat flour, wheat flour, and water. That's it. There's no salt added at all, so they're sodium free. But if you can find 100% buckwheat soba noodle, great, because the more nutrition, the better, because it's a good source of, now obviously you're going to pick up some fiber from the buckwheat, but it is a pretty good source of protein. It's a great, as far as whole grain flours go, buckwheat's one of the higher ones. So it has a nuttier flavor. It definitely has its own flavor. This came in a packet of 3. So there were 3 of these little packets that are tied together, little bundles. There are 3 in here. This recipe calls for 6 ounces of raw buckwheat noodles. So that was about 2 out of the 3 packs. This is a 9.5 ounce package. So the one step that you do want to do with this, and this is where you're reading your recipes, right, ahead all the way through. You're not adding the dry buckwheat noodles to to your broth to cook in the broth, in the soup. You're cooking your noodles ahead of time. So I almost forgot to do that before this because I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I got to cook the noodles. I haven't tried cooking them in the broth. I mean, you might have to add more water, obviously. I don't know if that would work. It could save a step, but I haven't tried it. So this is what 6 ounces of the buckwheat noodles look like cooked. This literally took 4 minutes. So, I mean, it took longer to bring the water to a boil in the pot, but they cook really quickly. So these are just a nice little alternative to soup noodles. You could use these as pasta instead of regular pasta. They're kind of fun. They cook so fast. So at this point, you would have had this soup cooking for about 15 to 20 minutes at a simmer. And then we're not cooking these noodles now. So these are just going in to just warm up. So now you're going to want to add the buckwheat noodles in that you've already cooked. We're just going to stir those around. And then we're going to add the remaining chickpeas. So this was 2 15-ounce cans of chickpeas that we drained and rinsed. And we took a half a cup of these to do our little crispy chickpeas over on the side, which we did first. Now we're just going to add the remaining chickpeas to our pot. And then this, you just kind of let this kind of warm through, just a couple minutes or so. And I'll pull this off heat just to show you at this point. I'm like this, now that I'm looking at this, I probably should have picked my bigger Dutch I have a Le Creuset Dutch oven. I probably should have used that because that was a little bit bigger. But this one is, it's going to still fit the final ingredient that we're adding. But all right, so here's our soup so far. If you can see that, that's with pretty much everything. We've got, kind of one major thing that we're going to add here. All right, so I'm going to keep this up on medium heat. So that's going to warm through. Now, what I'm adding here at the end, and this is to add some texture, some crunch, and also nutritionally, we're bringing in a little more, nutritional value to this chickpea noodle soup. The original recipe, I think, called for broccolini. I guess you could use broccoli rabe. I'm just not the biggest fan of either one of those. So my preferred addition is bok choy, but I don't know, my market didn't have bok choy, so I didn't do bok choy. So I thought, well, what would be another alternative? So I went with the Napa cabbage. This is what was left of this big Napa cabbage that I got, and I already stripped out some of those outer leaves, and I just chopped them up. So I have a whole bag of just thinly chopped up of the Napa cabbage, and I'm going to use that instead. Now, the thing with Napa cabbage is that it's not like regular cabbage. It does soften up pretty quickly. It does get a little softer, so it doesn't have quite as much crunch as if you were maybe using regular green cabbage here, or if you were going to use the broccolini or the broccoli rabe or the bok choy. I like the bok choy. I prefer that. But I thought, I've never done the Napa cabbage, but I thought, why not? So that it just looked so nice. And I'll probably chop up the rest of this, and then I'll just use it to toss in salads. Or if I do a stir fry or anything, then I'll do that as well. All right, so now we're just gonna add, you're gonna add whatever green or vegetable that you're using. It's really, I don't think there's anything you couldn't add here. It's up to you. But the idea behind this is, it's just kind of bringing some freshness now to the dish before you serve it. And this just cooks for just a little bit, not much, just to break it down. But you can see my pot's getting pretty full here. All right, so I'm just going to kind of push this down in, and then this will just soften a little bit, ideally not too much, because we do want that texture when we're eating the soup. All right, so that's kind of the final thing we're adding as to this before we actually plate it. And I do want to plate it for you, even though before it's, we could have, like I said, this you'd want to cook this a little bit longer before you add the final, cabbage or broccoli or the bok choy. All right, so let's pull over then how we're going to kind of finish. So here we have those crispy chickpeas that we did in the very beginning with some of our nutritional yeast and a little sprinkle of, oh, you know what I didn't add extra salt to this, and I didn't add pepper. So I am going to do some pepper right now because I have some ground pepper here. I'm not going to add salt right now until I taste it. And if I need more salt, I might. The recipe does call for you to add an additional half a teaspoon of salt to the soup, in addition to the miso. So you may need to do that, you may not. That's kind of up to your taste. All right, so let me pull some of this out, and then I'll show you how we're gonna finish it up. So kind of grab some of your buckwheat noodles along with some of the cabbage. And then let me get a ladle so I can get some of the broth. All right, so this looks looking really nice. All right, so that's pretty much the finished, not finished, but that's how you're gonna initially, plate it. Then you can finish it. Obviously, you can chop up some cilantro, or you can chop up some parsley. I didn't have, this is the first time I didn't really have fresh herbs in although I do have basil. I probably could have chopped up some of my fresh basil. So, but then to finish it, if you happen to have any chili crunch oil or any little chili oil, you could even use a little hot sauce if you wanted to. You could skip this altogether, but again, this is something that I always have in my refrigerator because I use it for so many different things. But you're really just going to take your little crispy chickpeas, and then they're going to go on top. So you kind of have two different textures going on here. You have your softer chickpeas that you have that's in the soup, and then you have a little bit of a crispy chickpea with the nutritional yeast and a little bit of salt on the ones that we're putting on top. And then, let me just grab a spoon, and then just take a little bit of the chili oil, the chili crunch oil, and then we just kind of add a little bit to the top. This is like a chili crunch garlic oil, and I like this one because it's not super hot. Some of these chili crunches can be so hot. They're just too hot for me. I just can't. So this one is a S&B umami topping. It's crunchy garlic with chili oil, and they're a mild version, and that one I love. And there you go. So there's your chickpea noodle soup with crunchy chickpeas on, crispy little chickpeas on top. If you have the chili oil and want to use that, you can certainly finish it with that, or just top it with some herbs. All right, I'm gonna set this off into the side. I'm gonna turn this down a little bit because this is really simmering, so I'll put the lid back on. All right, so there you go. So if you want to try a vegan version of chicken noodle soup, I hope you give it a try. Let me know. This is kind of the end of we were kind of doing soups and stews for this month, and now next week we're gonna move into seafood. So we're gonna do a sushi bake next Thursday, which has become one of our favorite recipes. It's just a family favorite. It's super easy. It's an interesting twist on sushi. So I hope you can join me next Thursday. Until then, stay well. All right, see you soon.